everybody. Welcome into Basketball by Association. My name is Basketball by. That is my good pal Association over there. What's up, Association?
What up, Basketball by? This is episode 138. We got all sorts of topics to get to in the home stretch of the playoffs. We've got big injuries and all that. We do have to name the episode real quick before we get any further. And you're going to like this one, Arky Shea, because this is episode 138. No player in NBA history has logged 138 career playoff games, which is crazy. So as I was trying to look through and scramble to find some stat that we could tie around this, I'm like, I'm working too hard. What I'm going to do is I'm going to instead defer this to Arky, but in a fun way. So Arky, you get to name this episode after any player that comes to mind. Don't think about it too hard. That you have really enjoyed watching this year that maybe you didn't think you'd enjoy as much or you didn't know much about him, where it's not a huge known player. Like, let's not get ridiculous and go Nikola Jokic or Luka or something like that. But just an unheralded guy that you've enjoyed watching, or, because I know you like to wager a little bit of money on games at times, maybe a player or the player that you feel has been the best to you in the wagering world.
Okay. Until you gave that caveat of this year, I had definitely I knew where I was going to go. But now
we can do a retroactive one if you absolutely need to. But
it's not need to, but I do want to bring it up in just a moment. I was going to say give some love to my guy Walker Kessler, right, and name it after him. But I'm going to go Keegan Murray.
Okay.
Can I go Keegan Murray? This is the Keegan Murray episode. Yeah,
we can do that.
Keegan Murray. Keegan Murray is a kid I thought would be pretty decent out of college. Watched a bunch of his games. I was optimistic, but I wasn't completely sold on what he could be. And I don't even know what he's averaging this year. Let me look that up real quick. He is averaging what? Yeah, 12 and 5. So not bad over there in Sacramento.
He is fifth. I just saw this stat because I watched the Kings and Celtics the other day where the Kings did lose at home to Boston, but there's no shame in that. Keegan Murray is fifth on the list, not of rookies, but in the entire NBA on catch and shoot threes made.
Ooh.
And the rest of the list is pretty crazy. We're talking like Klay Thompson and Max Strus and those guys were like, that's the living they make. And Murray already as a rookie is sitting fifth on that list. So not bad.
Yeah, that is not bad. Okay, so this is the Keegan Murray Iowa Hawkeye episode. I also feel like I can dedicate this to him because my Auburn Tigers defeated his Iowa Hawkeyes in the NCAA tournament.
That's fair. And Kessler is an Auburn guy, right? So
he is. He's a North Carolina and an Auburn guy. They go wiggle. War damn eagle, kick him in the butt, big blue. Hey, so there you go. Well, I wanted to mention this first. It's not going to get a lot of play the rest of the episode, and that's fine. If you wouldn't mind giving me just like 30 seconds, and I know he deserves a lot more, to just say my condolences for and my sadness at the loss of the captain, Willis Reed.
Yeah.
He's clearly before my time. I mean, he's winning the Knicks 2 titles. 73 was 12 years before I was born. Full 12 years before I was born. But in Knicks lore, there's Willis Reed and everybody else.
That's true.
There's Willis Reed, and then he's on that team with like Dave DeBusschere and stuff like that. There's Willis Reed. There's the 70 team. There's the 73 team. And then you could start talking about Walt Frazier,
and Ewing,
talking about Patrick Ewing, and John Starks. Clearly, you can, but it all starts with the captain. It all starts with Willis Reed, May 8th, 1970. I'll remember that day because I was not there for it. No, but I just the stories. So I became a Knicks fan in, I told you the first time I started becoming a Knicks fan. They were really good with Patrick, right? And it was semi near the end of Patrick's career. I became an NBA, but more importantly, Knicks fan 92, 3, 4, somewhere around there before the Knicks sort of made their, they're fighting with the Bulls every year in Indiana every year. And they're finally getting through to, play Houston for the championship. And then quietly San Antonio for a championship. I don't really want to talk about that year much, especially since the strike shortened. But anyway, to go back and sort of love the Knicks as much as I do, and to sort of research them and talk to people about them and the stories about them, like it always comes down to Willis Reed.
Yeah,
it always comes down to the game that no one thought he was going to play. They thought, no way, with that deep thigh bruise, no way he's playing against the Lakers. In Game 7, right? And then they announced the team starters, and out of the tunnel comes Willis Reed taking off his warm-ups. And I've read stories where, like, people said inside that arena, there has never been a louder crowd and a louder moment than what people talk about when they announced that he was going to be able to play.
The literal blow the roof off the arena moment.
Yeah. And the great thing about it is he literally scored the first basket of the game. In fact, he scored the first 2 baskets of the game. Never scored a basket again that rest of that game. Played like 30 minutes or something in that game, but was the definition of a captain, a leader, and an inspirational kind of player. And you let Walt Frazier go take up the rest. Walt Frazier had a crazy Game 7 in that one. But literally, like, there is no New York's legend without Willis Reed, and it sucks to lose him. And I had read something before that he had sort of been battling health things for the last couple of years. But like, he was sort of he was not one of these legends that was out there often and that was doing tons of interviews in general. That wasn't, he was just a quiet, dignified man who was the backbone of the biggest franchise in NBA when it comes to like the market size and stuff like that. But when you talk about the city of New York, it's Willis Reed. That's why I got offended when people started calling Derek Jeter the captain. I got a little upset because I found out I never called Derek Jeter the captain. I know Derek Jeter was more my era kind of thing. But when I found out the Willis Reed, the captain, how much he was sort of referred to as that, and why he was referred to as that. I don't care what Derek Jeter did, especially in the city of New York. No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Willis Reed did it first. Willis Reed did it when it mattered the most. And I just want to say that it sucks. It sucks to lose a piece of Knicks history like that, a real piece of New York, because the Knicks don't have a ton of those guys. Like, they're not littered with legends like that. They've had good players come through and play for them, but the number of guys that just are synonymous with the New York Knicks, it's not a deep list, and that for the number one guy to go down, it's too bad. It really is unfortunate.
While we're eulogizing the captain, I'll just share one quick anecdote that it was actually Richard Jefferson on the Nets broadcast the other night. They were playing the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the news had just recently broken about Willis Reed's passing. And Richard Jefferson, one of my favorite commentators, he can be both funny and insightful, and he's almost always on point. He was talking about when he was in New Jersey with the Nets, Willis Reed was there a lot. Now, Willis Reed had connections not only with the Knicks, but also with the Nets. He was a coach of the Nets, and he was in the front office of the Nets for a time as well. And he still hung around both organizations. And Richard Jefferson was just talking about how, as a young player, Willis Reed would come up to him and be chatting him up. And all Willis Reed wanted to do was talk basketball about the league and what was going on at that time, how Richard Jefferson was doing, how the team was doing. Willis Reed didn't work for the team anymore, but he just wanted to pick everybody's brain about the league. And that always stood out to Richard Jefferson about just what a sponge and how passionate, even after his playing days are done, he's not in a front office role anymore. He's just kind of a friend of both organizations and is there in the background. He goes to the practices. Like, he still is just living and breathing the NBA, and he can't get enough of it. And he's just there soaking it in and loving it, but also this great mentor to any player that wants to come talk to him, whether you're at the end of the bench, you're a rookie, you're a star, whatever, like he's just there. And it speaks, I think, to what you're talking about, that captain mentality again of like kind of servant leadership. And he's not too big for anybody or too big, the moment's not too big for him or whatever. Like that really was a cool story. You don't hear that about all the legends. And you certainly don't hear about a guy who's like willing to do that. And it's in multiple organizations that he's there being that guy. You can only think of a few, maybe Jerry West, he's had a big impact on a couple of both the Lakers, obviously, and the Grizzlies, and then the Clippers for a little bit. But yeah, it's special. So I was glad that story was able to kind of get out into the wider audience. And I learned something about Willis Reed that I didn't know either.
Yeah, so rest in peace to the ultimate fixture in New York Knicks basketball history, and one of the most important pieces of early like popularization of NBA early time. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah. And by the way, he that was it that 70 run, that first year run, where like he's beaten like the cream of the crop, like he's beaten Kareem, and he's beaten. Was it 70? It's got to be 70, right? That's when Wes Unseld was like the rookie of the year and MVP of the league that year. I think
I'll go look that up.
I think it was I don't think it was the 73 year. I think it was. It could be one. It's got to be one of the two, right?
Unseld came into the league in 68, 69. So he's already hit.
Oh, no, he was coming off the rookie of the year and NBA player of the year. Yeah. Then I think he ends up being Wilt in 70, beats Kareem in 70. Like to get to that championship, that first one for the Knicks, that's legendary stuff. Legendary stuff for the Knicks. And then the next chapter is Patrick Ewing and then Carmelo Anthony. So, although you can say Carmelo's 2007 was better, maybe. You can't actually. I don't think you can. No. Amari Stoudemire.
And now it's Julius Randle. Like kudos to him. And I'm not making fun because I watched the Timberwolves Knicks game the other night where the Wolves did win, but Randle put up 52 or 54, whatever it was. Unstoppable. You knew the move was coming. He's got the LaMarcus Aldridge over the shoulder, turnaround jumper now at this point. But he's a much more diversified offensive player than Aldridge was. It's just he's got that move in the bag. But he was hitting it out of the wing threes, bringing it down. I've said a couple times on this broadcast, like this is the first time in a while that I'll tune into Knicks games like willingly and not facetiously in any kind. Like I like this team. I like the group that they have. It's not a market or a team that I'm naturally drawn to. Usually I try purposely not to like them, but this is a good group and I like what they have. I like where they're at in 5th place. They're going to be a tough team. And I'm really happy for Julius Randle, a guy that like bounced around a little bit. The Lakers moved him and the Pelicans took a look, but the Pelicans already at that point were bringing him off the bench because Anthony Davis was still there. And you're like, man, this is a high lottery pick and they're moving him to the bench already. Like, what does that really mean for him? And then going to New York where you've got the huge pressure, but you've got the huge contract too. And he's delivered a couple of years that are like close to MVP level. He's helped them be relevant. I like the other guys that are around him, but I do think we're seeing like this is going to be hopefully for a long time the Julius Randle era in Knicks history. Whereas, Carmelo was relatively short, a little bit fraught. Ewing had that length and there's always the asterisk of, well, he never won a championship, but nobody can take away the fact that they battled and fought and they were in the mix like multiple times. And I do hope that for Julius Randle. I hope that for this group and I hope it for the Knicks too, that like you get a real nice run out of the young guys that they have here and what they're building.
Well, let's lead briefly with stories from our teams real quick. So the Knicks have like 8 games left. They're 4 games out of Cleveland for a home playoff for the first round guaranteed. And I think they're 2 games up on Brooklyn right now. I think it's a pretty solid shot. We're looking at Knicks, Cleveland, New York, Cleveland for that first round. And if so, I think that would be an awesome series.
That's a retro throwback series too, right? Because how many times did the Knicks run into Mark Price and Brad Daugherty, or even later, like the Terrell Brandon, Tyrone Hill Knicks when Mike Fratello was coaching them, and that would have been right smack dab in the mid '90s when the Knicks were trying to get out, with Ewing. Like they've run into the Cavs before, especially in first rounds. Like,
listen,
this will be fun.
There was some cool. The New York Knicks Eastern Conference playoff. The Knicks have a good long history with about 5 teams.
That's true.
That they've played with, right? Yeah. And Cleveland's one of those less mentioned ones that they ran into over and over again. But I just sort of wanted to say that it seems as if the Knicks, I thought maybe last week, had a shot to run up on Cleveland to get that 4th spot. Probably not going to get it, but regardless, unless Brooklyn gets really hot over this next couple of weeks, it'll probably be New York and Cleveland for that first series. And I won't hate it because I think that'll be probably the best first round series out of the East. I think competitively, it's the problem most of the comedy, in my opinion. But let me ask you about this. There's a young man in Minnesota who's been missing ever since Thanksgiving, and now he makes his return against the Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks. And Karl Anthony Towns is, can I say, still pretty good? Is that okay to say? Still a pretty good basketball player? What did he end up with last night?
Let's go back and look here. And I mean, just to bring it full circle, Karl Anthony Towns is a New Jersey guy. So
yeah, that's right. That's right. I don't know why the circle's got to be so northeastern right now. 22 points last night. 22 points. Not bad for a guy who hasn't seen the basketball in 4 months.
22 points in 26 minutes. Is
that efficient? Is that pretty efficient?
It is. And I don't want to backhand compliment, but I'm going to. You saw the best and the worst of Towns in his return, in that it was a little bit awkward trying to get him and Gobert to fit. It was less awkward trying to get Towns and Naz Reid to fit. But both of those guys can be a little bit spacey sometimes on defensive rotation. It's the reason why Naz Reid, who's one of the most talented backup centers in the league, I'm not being hyperbolic. The dude's got handles. He can finish. He can do it all offensively, but defensively, he'll make mistakes. And Towns is the same way. Towns has less of an excuse because he's older. So they missed some rotations. Towns got yanked a couple of times where they had to bring back on Taurean Prince or Kyle Anderson, just somebody that they knew was going to know exactly where to be and be there.
By the way, Taurean Prince definitely fouled Bay last night.
Yeah. But
the officials admitted it. The officials admitted it after the game. You got away with one, Joel. You got away with one.
I will not feel bad for the Hawks whatsoever, because there were so many bogus calls of Trae Young getting to the free throw line last night, where he was doing the leg kick out, he was stopping short, all sorts of things that are completely illegal and getting away with it. He, I think, has surpassed James Harden as like the league's leading foul drawer / flopper, where it is all just a game.
Hey, that's a skill.
So I don't feel bad. I don't feel bad if Taurean got away with one, because Trae was getting away with it. But on the flip side, so like Karl Anthony Towns made a couple mistakes here and there, had a couple of offensive fouls against setting screens, the stuff that just drives you crazy when he's in year 7 or 8 or whatever it is. But offensively, there were times where, especially without Anthony Edwards, they were chugging along and not doing too well. And the ability to throw the ball into Towns and for him to make a move and just manufacture points, or to be the trailing guy, especially early in the game when the Hawks were, I think, assuming he was going to be rusty, as the trailing guy, to step into some threes and knock down big points. Like, he had 8 points in his first stint, which was about 3.5, 4 minutes. And he energized the crowd. He energized the team. And it was cathartic, too, that he got pulled from the game multiple times, either to give him a rest or because defensively they were starting to break down, because he's just a little rusty with that. But that he was the guy who got to come back on the floor when they were down, was part of them getting back within 1 point. He was on the floor defensively on the final play, but he also was the guy that got fouled with 3 seconds left and goes to the free throw line and knocks down both free throws to give them the 1 point lead. That was, a nice narrative arc for Towns to be the guy that helped them at the very beginning, helped them at the end, and did energize them. And it's a must-win game. I mean, Minnesota is down in that play-in group in the West. It is so tight with the Lakers. The Thunder, the Jazz are still hanging out. The Blazers are probably out of it here soon. Dallas is hanging out down there. Golden State's in danger. New Orleans is there. They're all within a half game of each other. And if Minnesota drops some of these games, they could be out of the playoffs. So this is big. The Wolves broadcasters made the point that these are all playoff games now for all of these teams in the West, in the play-in, and really in the East too. The playoffs have begun already down these last 7 games, and I think that's what the NBA ultimately wanted anyway.
Yes, on the last part, most specifically. I think it's just nice to see him back. I like to see superstars back. This league has been wrought with injuries the last few seasons, especially near the end of the year. Mm-hmm. It's nice to see people coming back, right? To be able to
and see. They're going to get Anthony Edwards back
right.
Either on Sunday here or possibly early next week. It should be no later than a week from now. So
it's coming at the best time possible for them for these next handful of games that Edwards will be back for, but to try to get in some kind of shape that you listen. You take your future in your hands when you get to the play-in, right? Mm-hmm. But as easily as it can go badly, it can go really well for you in a game, and then you play yourself into one of those sweet series that seem to see the people tend to like on the old association. All right,
everybody's got to be hoping. I don't care whether you're a Minnesota fan or not. We've all got to be hoping that Minnesota not only climbs out of the play-in tournament, but climbs out in that 7th seed again, and we get another rematch with the Grizzlies in the first round, because not only was that arguably the most entertaining first round series last year, but every single regular season matchup between these teams, and I know a lot of people probably don't tune into those, although they have been on national TV a lot more this time, every single matchup with the Grizzlies in the regular season this year has been a bloodbath. These two teams do not like each other. They're trying to show each other up. It is physical. It's playoff caliber. It is a real rivalry, and the NBA does not have enough of those. And because it's 2 small market teams, it flies under the radar, but I think it's going to keep growing to be a thing. I want that first round series so bad. I know Memphis is going to be tough to get by. It's counterintuitive. If I'm a Wolves fan, I want them to get as far as possible, but I just want that rematch again, and the league should want it too.
Technically, Mr. Joel C. Cordes, you should have the 6th seed right now. And the reason is because the NBA screwed the Mavericks yesterday. Mm-hmm. Granted, it's a 2-point game, and it was 5 at the end, so it was a 3 that made it sort of look closer than it was. But the officials screwed everybody in that game that was wearing Dallas Mavericks colors. Did you see what happened in that game?
I did not.
Okay, so here's the fun thing. Mark Cuban is filing a grievance for this right now. About 2 minutes to go in the third quarter, there's a loose ball. It goes in favor, the officials, he says, say in favor of the Mavericks. Okay. Actually, what was called on the court was favor of the Warriors. But the Mavericks called a timeout, and they got the timeout. Now, Joel, you know that you can't get a timeout unless you're technically in possession of the ball. Like, you have to be in possession to be able to call a timeout. So, Dallas thought they had the ball, and they were setting up on the other end of the court to come in on offense. The Warriors technically had the ball, but Mark Cuban said that the officials didn't tell them that. So coming out of the timeouts, you got a whole bunch of Warriors underneath one side of the basket, the Mavericks on the other side of the basket. The Warriors get a cheap 2 underneath the basket, and
by 2.
Everybody is freaking out in Dallas over that. Joel, I'll just say this: that game will not cause a lot of people to be upset, but there have been some officiating issues this season that are angerifying, depending on which team you root for. But I want to move past that right now, right? I'm just saying you should be the 6th seed right now and not the Warriors. We have had a chance to talk about this, and I want to get your head on this. What did you make of, and what are you still currently making of what's going on with Ja Morant? Ja Morant, we don't have to rehash it. Everybody at this point, if you're listening to this podcast, you know exactly what's happened to Ja Morant. But the fact in such a short period of time, he has had friends of his with like a laser on the end of a gun in Indiana, who would, people in Indiana are complaining that it was focused on them, and they've been banned from that arena for a while. There's obviously the strip club incident that happened. There's the Instagram Live, obviously, then with the handgun, and NBA players aren't supposed to have handguns when they're traveling with the team. What do you make of Ja Morant and the fact that he's had to take time away from the team now because of this? He's been basically suspended by the league for it, first by the team, then by the league, then going into some type of counseling. For a great young, and he is legitimately a superstar of this league. What do you make of everything that's happened over the last couple of months with one of the great ones? Because this goes to piggyback on the fact that Memphis not only is really good, should be having that rivalry with Minnesota, which is an awesome one, but you got the biggest star in all of it, who's wrapped up in all kinds of shenanigans that you're trying to figure out.
He's 23 years old, and I'm sure on this ride up to the top, there's been a lot of hangers on, and everybody wants a piece of Ja. And as a 23-year-old, you don't make good choices. And sometimes you learn through advice. Sometimes you learn the hard way. If you don't learn, it can go away so fast. I really hope, and Ja right now, coming out of counseling and even going into counseling before and coming back to the team the other night in the 131-25 win over the Rockets, is saying all the right things. But you never know if it's Ja who's saying that, or it's his publicist feeding him lines, or it's the team, PR people feeding him lines. So you hope that what he's saying is how he really feels and that he's taking it seriously. But I really hope that as part of this counseling, he's had Gilbert Arenas in his ear, because Gilbert Arenas is the perfect cautionary tale of how fast you can go from an MVP caliber guy to not only self-wrecking your opportunities, but then after you pass through some of that, then circumstance, the injuries that pile up for Gilbert Arenas, he's never the same player once he comes back. He goes from being an MVP caliber guy to a guy who's on a fringe roster guy, hanging around, trying to make it, and it doesn't work. And Arenas is out of the league, I think, before he's 30. I'd have to go back and look at that. But certainly by his early 30s. And how much of that can be blamed on his own knuckleheadery, and how much can be blamed on the injuries that he can't account for and aren't his fault? But the moral of the story is, just because you're at the top, it may take you a while to get up there. It can be over in an instant. And Ja Morant hopefully has gotten a little taste of that, and hopefully is humbled enough to open his ears to the other cautionary tales that are out there, and to understand that, like, dude, you could tear that ACL, you could tear that Achilles at any point, and this otherworldly athleticism that you have that allows you to be able to be the star, to cash those checks, to be the guy, that can all go away. But the thing that might get you the second chance in a Grant Hill sort of scenario, an Anthony Hardaway scenario, God forbid, is that you were a good guy that teams go, yeah, man, that really sucks for player X, but we're going to bring him into camp and we're going to see if we can get something out of him. And those extra chances come. If you were a knucklehead, and doesn't matter how talented you were, if you were a knucklehead and then those injuries happen, that karma, whatever you want to call it, is real, and it follows you, and it decides how many chances you have to overcome potentially the things that are out of your control, because your character is within your control, and it is okay to, like, mistakes happen, but man, you better learn from it. And the scary part with Ja here is it's not just one mistake, right? It's not, oh, there was this incident and Ja got in trouble and he was at a strip club and he flashed a gun and it was dumb. It's that there's the string of incidents, and the Grizzlies have already said, yeah, we've been talking to him about this. Uh-oh. That's the troubling part.
Yeah, let me say this and just sort of caveat it with as much as I can. Memphis is a different city. Okay, like can we just say, like, you've been to Memphis and you've seen, Memphis City and Memphis basketball, that's a different culture.
Mm-hmm. And I love it. I love it, by the way.
It's different. It's really different. It's unique. It's really fun for their fans. It's fun for people who are fans of the Grizzlies. And it's fun as someone who is a fan of a different team to see a completely different environment sort of represented when you watch games happening in Memphis. But there is sort of a deeper hip-hop culture there than probably in a lot of places. And he's been there, what, now 3 years, 4 years? This is fourth or fifth year in Memphis.
Look that up.
He's been
I think fourth. I think it's his fourth.
Okay, so he's been there long enough to where that culture and your pals that come from that culture there sort of get ingrained in you. Not that he's doing anything bad specifically, right? Not that he's doing anything that's illegal for the most part. In fact, the owner of I read something, that blurb from the owner of that strip club, who was like, hey, this guy was super respectful. He tipped everybody really well, right? He's a good kid, and stuff like that. Like, now I don't know how you allow those photographs to get out there, like if you think so highly of him and you want him to come back. But regardless, he doesn't seem to be a bad kid. He seems to be a guy that has made a string of very youthful bad decisions, right? Whether you are a part of gun culture and enjoy being able to have that have a piece on you, so to speak, and to be able to flash it because it looks cool on your Instagram live, so on and so forth. Or whether you get wrapped up with guys who think it's cool to put a laser on somebody that thinks it's on the end of a gun, so it freaks them out. Like, there are mistakes made. There are lots of mistakes. There's a rash of them happening in a very short amount of time, which is why I think this is not indicative of a larger issue for Ja. I don't think it's a phase, so to speak, but if they all happen so close together, to me that says that's something that's happened recently. That's something that's a big chunk of time, and that you can get a guy through pretty successfully. If
you hope so.
Yeah, you sort of hope so, unless you think he's a kid that's lost. But there's no one I've read about Ja Morant in the last year or two that thinks anything bad of the guy, right? Like they think he's a good guy. He's a sweetheart. He's respectful. He's maybe doesn't know what to do with all the fruits of his labor, and where specifically to put all of that energy. Not everybody goes and starts energy drink companies when they get all this money or invest in real estate or something. Yeah. Sometimes they just go and throw bands at the strip club, and that's fine.
Right.
Like there is nothing illegal about doing that.
Right.
Brandishing firearms, probably it's a different situation, but that's what he's in trouble for, not the strip club stuff. So you can teach him things like that, and you can say, hey, watch who you're hanging around with, watch who you're sort of dealing with. Talk to them, get in their ear, say, hey, if we're going to travel together, if we're going to be buddies and Aussies around, we got to live by a certain code.
There's got to be somebody in the entourage.
Everything you do reflects upon me.
Yes, there's got to be somebody in the entourage, and maybe this is step one for Ja. Do you got to cut ties with some people? Maybe, but do you need to get somebody in that group, in that close-knit group that you travel with, your buddies, that is the voice of reason, that is going to be that angel on your shoulder when everybody else is doing something stupid or questionable or whatever, where you go, yeah, normally I would love to jump in on that, but I probably shouldn't. And, it's that catch-22 that says, I have the power to do so. And if I was not an NBA star, I probably could without any real repercussions. It's not like he was unloading the firearm. He just showed it. But at at the same time, you got to look at it the other way around that goes, yeah, but if I weren't an NBA star, I wouldn't have the entourage around me and I wouldn't have all these opportunities, and
That's
that can
what's
go
tough,
away.
right?
And just go look. I mean, again, not to kick dirt on somebody, but there are guys that we know within the league that made questionable choices for a long time that didn't turn things around. Steve Francis kind of sort of seems to still be in that mode. Antoine Walker finally got out of that mode and is trying to rebuild stuff, within his life, and obviously to try to recoup some of his finances and stuff like that. It doesn't take long to screw this up. And it's not like Ja Morant hasn't been given all of the stuff at the beginning of the season and all the stuff during the rookie symposium and the support from the Grizzlies. Like, this is not a matter of just, oh, I didn't know. It's, oh, I got it, but it doesn't apply to me because I'm feeling invincible because I'm at the top of the heap. And that's where you got to hope that the humility and all the good aspects of Ja Morant, those are the things that come forward, because you can guarantee he's been told the right thing. It's a matter of being able to take that and apply that and go, yeah, that means me too. And it might mean slightly less quote unquote fun on a small microcosm level, but it'll keep the lights on for everything else that I want to be able to do in my life. And the far greater amount of fun that you can have with your position and paycheck and all that other stuff. Like, just don't screw that up, Ja. You got the world by the fingertips right now. Don't screw it up, man.
I want to get into a couple of other basketball things before we get out, but I do just think when it's hard. It's hard for someone for Ja, because Ja's in this league now where David Stern went out of his way to clean up the NBA to make it sellable to essentially white America, right? To sponsors, to corporations and things like that.
And he was a dictator in doing it, right?
Right.
But he did it. Yep.
Slowly over time, at the end of Stern, now some Adam Silver stuff, the players are getting everything they want. There is almost no real pushback from the league. Essentially, for bigger type issues, they get more time off than they've ever gotten. They get more freedom. They get way more money than they've sort of ever gotten. So, to be able to try to put the reins down on someone who may be sort of getting outside the pasture and a little wild a little bit, it's tough. It's tougher than it was before. But I think you can hit guys a certain way to figure out what works and what gets their attention. Is it money? Probably not for Ja. He's throwing 50, 100 grand up in strip clubs right now. He's having the time of his life as a young fella, right? He probably doesn't see that as being that big of an issue. Maybe playing time was it. So maybe you take away games where he can't play, and it's not because of an injury, it's because of decisions that he made. Maybe that's sort of a thing. It's just, I think it's more difficult when you get into situations that look like they're going to be early stages of a possible bigger problem, like a Steve Francis situation.
Yeah.
I worry. I don't think it's impossible. I don't think it's even nearly difficult, but you just worry when there's so much freedom for NBA players just in general that they've gotten from the league itself. What it takes to sort of reel, young folks back in like that, who've gotten hundreds of millions of dollars coming to them and already in their bank account, kind of thing. That, All right, Joel, let me talk about basketball, if you don't mind, for a quick second. It turns out that everything we have thought about the NBA is completely right. Have you noticed this? Now, outside of a couple of small things, like let's just say, for example, Sacramento, right? We talked about Sacramento and how they've been good all year, and I think it's the 3 seed right now. They've come back to earth a little bit, right? But the rest of the West hasn't quite caught up with them. Now, Phoenix, we thought was going to be able to sort of make that run, but they're just recently getting Kevin Durant into the lineup, and they've been trying to get back to full health as well, and
then he rolls the ankle in warm-ups in the home opener. Like, that
like,
seems a little star-crossed, but I hope it does not portend.
We can't figure that out. The Clippers we thought were going to be pretty good, but not great yet. It looks like that's what we're seeing right now. Memphis in the West is exactly where we thought they would be. A really good team. Denver, we didn't think they would make that huge drop. And if you look at the East, it's the same three teams we thought it was going to be, whatever the order is.
Four, really, because we put the Cavs up there too.
Oh, yeah, we put the Cavs over big time. Like, we thought the Cavs were a really good team. So, we can take credit for the four. What has surprised you about this season, good or bad? I feel like we've nailed a lot.
Yeah, we have.
It's like we know what we're doing. I don't know.
I'm surprised that the Clippers are only 3 games above 500. And it's not that Kawhi and Paul George have missed massive amounts of time. They've missed reasonable amounts of time. And now George is out probably until the beginning of the playoffs. But Paul
George has played 56 of their 73 games, and Kawhi's played 44.
Which I'll take. I don't think, like, you wish it was a little more, but I'll take that within reason. And it was a deep team. They've reshuffled their bench already. They're still deep. 3 games above 500, you could say, yeah, but they're in the 5th seed. They're at least playoff lock. That's great and everything, but to not have home court advantage when you have that team, a lot of us, myself included, were picking the Clippers to make it to the Western Conference Finals, maybe even get a little bit further. That's been an unpleasant surprise. And similarly for Dallas, like, Luka's supposed to be the MVP candidate. This is supposed to be his year. Yeah, they have some really tough injuries early on. I think Maxi Kleber missing a lot of the year is a bigger deal than people realize, especially because they had already moved off some of their other defenders. Now they bring in Kyrie. That doesn't really move the needle. Dallas is in danger of missing the playoffs, period, including the play-in tournament. That is surprising, and if that happens, it is time for Jason Kidd probably to lose his job. I know he just got there, but in no way is that acceptable, and you have to really, really relook at the entire roster. I know they've already made some moves to, put out Dorian Finney-Smith and Spencer Dinwiddie. They already tried it with Porzingis. You really got to look deep into that. Otherwise, like, I don't know of too many other surprises. Like you said, the Eastern Conference, I look up and down that list. I'm impressed that the Nets are still in 6th after losing KD as many games as KD didn't play, as many games as Kyrie didn't play, of the dysfunctions there, as many games as Ben Simmons has missed. And they continue to play about 500 basketball, maybe a little bit better than that. It's a testament to Jacques Vaughn. It's a testament to all the role players. There are better teams, talent-wise, underneath them in Miami, in Atlanta, probably even in Toronto, that all feel like they should be ahead of the Nets, and they just aren't.
Right.
So that's a pleasant surprise.
I like that feeling. It's like, we should be beating them better than them. Why aren't we?
And Sacramento, yeah, like you and I talked about, they're going to be watchable this year. Tune in. This is a good team. Maybe they can be a fringe playoff team, but man, it's going to be tough for them with so many good teams in the Pacific Division. And that has held true. You literally could have all five of the Pacific Division teams in the playoffs or the play-in some way. And Sacramento, to me, it's not just, De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis have been really good. It's bigger than that. It's that the starting lineup has been fire all year. We kind of saw that coming. We said that could be a thing. But I was down on their bench. I said, I think this is a team that wins some games. They're going to be like the Bulls last year, maybe like the Hornets at times, where the starting lineup is nice, but the second unit just isn't going to get it done. Credit to Mike Brown. Credit to guys like Davion Mitchell, Terrence Davis. There's a lot. Chimezie Metu. Malik Monk is the big one, 6th man of the year candidate, probably the front runner. Like, those guys have stepped up into their roles. They've become a cohesive unit. And the Kings, again, will they be able to translate this, their first appearance in 17 years, into a first-round win at least? I have my concerns about the inexperience on that team. Outside of Harrison Barnes and Matthew Dellavedova, there really is no playoff experience to speak of out of that group.
Well,
Domantas Sabonis included, but they're good, and it's not just a flash in the pan.
Let me ask you this real quick, because I'll just say this real quick. My biggest surprise is that the East is so much stronger, top to bottom, playoff wise, than the West is. Yeah. I did not see the East coming this correct of this year. And that includes a Western Cup. Now we're used to teams like Utah being good in the West. Clearly, we thought they weren't going to be that good. They came back to earth real fast over there. Yep. Dallas has really sort of disappointed even since the Kyrie trade. I was not really expecting them to be this.
Every single Western team except for Denver and except for Sacramento has had major injury issues of some kind, usually to their top guys. That includes Golden State, it includes the Timberwolves, it includes Dallas, obviously the Lakers, the Suns now, the Grizzlies. You got to count the Ja Morant thing as an injury, but they also were missing Dylan Brooks and Desmond Bane, and they've been without Steven Adams. Like that's 4/5 of their starting lineup has missed major time for one reason or another. Like, and the Suns missing Durant. So yeah, it is a huge surprise, but there's a reason.
Here's the weird thing. The Kings are the 3 seed, right? So their first round matchup could be anyone between Phoenix, LA, Golden State, Minnesota, OKC, Dallas, the Lakers, the Jazz, or the Pelicans, because all those teams are still separated by 3 games at this point.
Yeah.
There is so much of a jumbled situation there in the West. So let me just ask you this about Sacramento. If they were to finally break that streak, and not only they're going to get to the playoffs, but to get to that first round win, which of those combinations, which team do you think is the best possible matchup for them to get past round 1?
Oklahoma City. I mean, that one's maybe obvious, but the Thunder have been scrappy all year and have messed things up for a lot of people.
I was going to say Dallas.
That feels okay also. Or I was going to say the Lakers without LeBron. Like if LeBron is still tardy and coming back, then you got a shot. But you get LeBron back onto those Lakers and they're starting to figure out their rotation a little bit. And obviously there's some top line talent there. That's where it's tough. Like you can't give Sacramento a ton of respect and put them as a favorite in many of these series, maybe just a couple, even though they're going to be the 3 seed.
I think, boy, that West is going to be really hard to bet, but that West is going to be a lot of fun to watch because we're still dealing, with major injury situations all over the place. We have cohesion issues in other places throughout the West. I don't know. I think Sacramento's in for a pretty decent run here. We always talk about that team that come into the playoffs. Young team hasn't done it before. They gotta get humbled a little bit, but I don't think it has to be in the first round. Like I think they can get to the semis and then be humbled a little bit. I don't think anybody. Okay, I'll just put it this way: if I'm looking at any of these matchups I just mentioned, the two that probably worry me the most, if I was Sacramento to get past that, probably the Clippers or Golden State. Those are probably the two that I would worry the most about because I think they're really good matchups. And I think they're also really battle-tested teams too that, when it comes down to those you got to have it moments, they're full of players that have had to have it for many, many years and have done that. So
I will say this, as much as I love the Kings and the cohesion that's there, I would by a hair if it's a fully healthy Minnesota and Sacramento matchup, I would give the edge to the Timberwolves in a first round series there too, but not by a whole lot.
I bet you would.
I do just want to add, like a couple of years ago, the West was kind of in a topsy-turvy state. The Warriors were all injured. And we said, this is the Suns' window. This is it. This is now. You got to do it. And they got to the finals, but they couldn't close it out. This has got to be the Denver Nuggets year, right? This is it. Like, because
you look at everybody that they
Memphis is just going to keep getting better.
So when the Suns went through that, that burst, and everybody got hurt in the West. Just everybody. Like in every single game was a new major injury that happened to somebody in the West. They almost took full advantage of it.
Yeah.
Almost. This year, if you're Denver, you have hit the ground running. You have been the best team in the West the entire year. You've got a guy who's going to win the third straight MVP on that roster. You have got a great lineup around him as well. And you've got a very, very, very depleted West when it comes to either cohesion or talent that's healthy, or even talent. Some of these talents just old, right?
Yeah.
Like you look at Golden State. Golden State's got a ton of miles.
And the Lakers, yeah.
And the Lakers, less miles than last year, fewer miles than last year. So
true.
So if you're Denver and you can't do it now, when are you going to do it? Right? Like Memphis would be a hell of a final. That would be a wonderful series to watch. But outside of that, like, listen, if Phoenix gets there, great. But you have to beat Phoenix. You just have to.
Durant or no Durant, right? Because even if he comes back, he's had no time to integrate with this group. None.
Yeah. You have to beat the Clippers. You have to beat the Warriors. You're younger. You're better. You're deeper right now. Like, you're healthier. If you're not going to do it this year, Denver's just not going to do it.
Mike Malone's job could be riding on even... Like, he could get to the conference finals and still potentially lose his job if they can't get out of the conference finals because of all the factors you just said.
If they get to the finals, because the finals have like 2 or 3 really good East teams. Like, if they get to the finals.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, the Eastern Conference, I think, is the front runner. And if you're Denver, you can be happy even if you don't win the championship, but you made that progression to get to the NBA Finals. But if you can't get to the NBA Finals, that's going to be a tough position for Mike Malone, because what else are you going to change? You've already been tinkering and beefing up the supporting cast. Do you make the Jamal Murray trade? Do you make a Michael Porter Jr. trade and continue to try to do that instead? They're going to be in a really awkward position if they cannot get out of the West.
Let me ask you this now before we get out of here. Let's talk about the top half of the East, the top part of the East. I'm mainly talking about Milwaukee, Boston, and Philadelphia. Cleveland, you can make a case for, but we're talking about the bellwethers that have proven over a few years and also are super loaded. When we last spoke, Milwaukee was hotter than hot. They're still really good right now. Won like 7 of the last 10, but like before it was like 16 in a row that they had won or something like that. Philadelphia's been that hot team recently. I think they've won 9 out of their last 10. They're riding high. Do you change how you feel about who comes out of the East? Because I feel like that semis and that finals in the East is going to be a war, and it's going to be so much fun to watch.
I absolutely love what the Celtics have. I love the depth, the rotation. I think it all makes sense.
Do you worry about Joe Mazzulla as the head coach there? Because there are people in Boston, not about being the guy to get fired or anything like that. But there are people in Boston who believe that there are multiple times that he has cost his team games. But he's not big on taking timeouts. He does not like to take a bunch of timeouts, no matter if it's giving guys rest or just trying to strategize. A lot of people don't think he's a great strategic head coach. Now, he came into a great situation with a bunch of dudes that are really, really good, and they were just in the finals last year. Do you worry about him being able to get all the way through this grind?
No, because he was a part of last year. He's got a great support staff around him. And truth be told, he's going to most likely run into a Bucks team with Mike Budenholzer or a Sixers team with Doc Rivers. Both of those guys have had their knocks against them plenty of times for getting out-coached in the series. I don't know that Budenholzer or Doc Rivers is the secret sauce for their respective teams. You know, it comes down, I think, in all of these cases to the assembled rosters, especially to the collection of superstars, and it's what's going to happen on the floor. It's not going to be necessarily the adjustments off of it that cost a series one way or the other. So, no, I'm not real worried about Mazzulla. And I'm really, shading and backhanding some of these other coaches at the top. You should be giving them all the respect because they're at the top. But I don't think any single one of them is known for being amazing tacticians in the moment, except that Doc Rivers is known for being really, really good at drawing after timeout plays. I mean, that has been a specialty of his, even dating back to the Magic days when his teams weren't all that good. So, not really. But I love.
Okay, let me just ask you this then. You pick one or the other, and then we'll finish up with your thought. I saw you get me going on a topic, and I want to keep punching the injuries. Not the injuries, but the issue here. Coach, one series, knowing completely their history. Joe Mazzulla, Doc Rivers. And Joe Mazzulla has like no real history. So let's just, that's why your silence is a little deafening. Because Doc Rivers has been really bad, except for like 2008.
Right. I've seen Doc Rivers make enough mistakes or lose his cool or do nothing. I've seen Budenholzer do nothing.
Oh, not Budenholzer.
Many times.
Just those two.
Doc Rivers, I don't know. It's a wash. Like it's a wash.
Isn't that bad if you're Doc Rivers?
Yeah, it is. I have not seen enough out of Joe Mazzulla that would make me worry about his readiness to be. I know there's been like some mistakes, but all coaches make mistakes throughout a season. It's not the same way as it was with like Jason Kidd's first year in Brooklyn, or even, Steve Nash's first year in Brooklyn, or sometimes these other coaches in their first year where they go, yeah, they ain't ready. Ryan Saunders, his first year in Minnesota, it's like they've got they clearly have some talent and some reasons that people gave them that position, but yeah, they're not ready to coach in a high profile matchup like that. I don't feel that way about Mazzulla. I think mistakes will be made, but not at a much higher rate than the other guys he would conceivably run into, or in a way that would make me worry whether he's fit for the job.
I'll say this about Doc Rivers. We're just still doing the comparison. Joe Mazzulla goes up 3-1 in a series and loses game 5. I don't feel like the pressure is nearly as much as it just immediately ramps up on Doc Rivers. We're like, dude, do we just now I gotta deal with this longer? And every year, Doc Rivers will be like, hey, you guys keep talking about it. It was game 5, it was game 6, and now it's game 7, and it's all we can talk about because, I'm off the Philadelphia bandwagon. I thought they had their chance to be able to do it. This is going to be the year that they do it, clearly, because I jumped off the bandwagon. I was 2 years too early on it. But let me just sort of ask you this. In your opinion, the Eastern Conference champion comes from one of those 4, yes?
Yeah, and it's Milwaukee. I love what Boston has. I really respect the fact that James Harden has figured out a way to become integrated and valuable to what the Sixers are doing. I love that Embiid has been able to stay healthy. I kind of hope that Embiid gets the MVP this year instead of Jokic, even though Jokic is more than deserving. But Embiid has been in that conversation so many times and his body has betrayed him. I just kind of feel like he's due. So I respect the Sixers a lot. They or Boston are very, very capable of getting to the NBA Finals. But I look at this Bucks team, and
they're
as good
so
as
complete.
They're so complete. It's the deepest. It's the deepest roster they've ever had around Giannis. Giannis, the light bulb is on. He's smarter than he's ever been. You're still in that sweet spot where Drew Holiday has not really entered a decline yet, but you're still integrating Middleton, and there still is some ceiling left, and there still is some ceiling for Jay Crowder and Joe Ingles to continue to be a little more integrated as they shake off some rust. So there's some upside left for this Bucks team, and Budenholzer finally does have a championship. He proved he could coach a championship winning team when there was major concerns about his ability to adapt and adjust. So
that's true. Going into that championship year, people are like, dude, if he doesn't do it, he might not be here next year.
Right. So it's Milwaukee, and not just because they're sitting in first. At this point, if all things were still equal and Milwaukee was in third, I still would be picking them just based on, it's completely arbitrary, but the eyeball test of watching those 3 teams. I look at Milwaukee and I see a championship team, and I don't really have any hesitations or concerns. I watch Boston and I watch Philly, and I see teams that can win a championship for sure. But Milwaukee is the only one that I've watched all year, and this includes Denver and Memphis on the other side, where I look at them and I go, that is a championship roster, and they're going to have to do something to screw it up, or somebody's going to get hurt, or some other team's going to have the series of a lifetime to take down what the Bucks have right now, because it is such a well-built group. And we've said this before. Only one team in the Eastern Conference has Giannis, and the rest of them don't.
I agree with a lot of what you say. The eyeball test is an interesting measure that you mentioned there, because outside of the Rockets, I've probably watched at least 4 or 5 games of everybody this year.
Yeah.
I just can't stomach the Rockets. I don't. It's hard. It's hard for me to get that much in love with them.
That's very much fair.
And I watched Denver, and I think this is a pretty good team. This is a pretty darn good team. They could totally win the West. It's wide open for them. Plus, they're good enough to be able to win it, and they got that big sack of potatoes that's winning MVPs everywhere. Then you go to the East, and you're like, okay, this is a different level that they're playing at right now.
It is.
Philadelphia, it's troublesome to me. Embiid and Harden, and I think Embiid's hurt again, right? You see, he left the game with the tiredness. What was it, calf? I think it was calf issue. Harden sat for that game, and I think they could be dangerous. I don't have no more faith in that team, and this could end up being Doc Rivers' last run.
There's a lot of variables of how it can go wrong for Philly, whereas it feels like there's fewer variables for Boston and even fewer for Milwaukee about how they could screw it up.
Boston cooled a lot, and I think you can lock them up better than you can Milwaukee. I think Boston is more defendable than Milwaukee is. I watched Milwaukee. What was the last full game I watched to them? It was right after the All-Star break. The last full game I watched, it was Milwaukee and
Philly, maybe, because that was the first game after the break for them.
Yep, I think it was Philly, right? Maybe the second game after.
And Philly actually did win that one, but they had to come back like to a crazy amount at home to be able to pull it off.
Boys, I'm gonna hate myself for this. It's really interrupting my point here. No, it was Miami.
That's fine.
It was Miami. So it was Miami, and they sadly only won that game by 12. But I think at the end of the first quarter they were up by 400. Like, you watch the first half of that game, and after a long break, you never sort of know which team you're going to sort of get back.
Mm-hmm.
And they looked so crisp, and they looked so fast. And they looked so precise with the way they play and the way they move
shooting
the ball
at every spot now. Every single guy around Giannis can shoot, with the exception of Javon Carter, but he's even hitting at a respectable enough rate, and he does enough good things otherwise. Like, oh my goodness.
That was the game where I was like, that's a good team, and I went to, okay, they're probably the team that's going to win it. Like, and Miami's no slouch, and they're not a super great team this year. Mm-hmm. They'll probably make the play in at this point.
Yeah.
But Miami wasn't trying to give. That's Kevin Love's first game back. I just think Milwaukee is so much deeper than everybody else. Is so much faster as a team. They play so fast. Where like there are teams that are fast, but like Milwaukee. Do you have access to where you can sort of find like their efficiency numbers, if they're like one of the most efficient? I know they got to be one of the most. I don't know if they're the most.
Probably not in the time that we have. I can try to look it up. Yeah,
they just get so many opportunities and so many easier opportunities because that ball is just moving and the floor is so spread out that like even if you do have Giannis and you need to double team him, you just don't have time to get there to do it most of the time. And I know the playoffs slow things down a little bit defensively, but man, when you got a fully healthy Milwaukee like you do now, I just don't know who can match up with them. I think Boston could take them to like 6 or 7. Like, I think that could be a really fun series. I don't think Philadelphia matches up with them well at all, for that matter, unless somehow Philly can muck up the water and slow that game down a lot, which I don't think they're going to be able to do. Cleveland would be a fun series to sort of watch for a little bit, but I think Milwaukee, 6 games is all it takes them to get out of any series.
You watch Milwaukee and you walk away going, they know what they're doing. They know who they are, what they do really well, And that, I think, is the crispness and the pace, where it may not even be the pace of the game itself, racing up and down the court. It's not even necessarily that. It is the efficiency to get to their spots, to get to the looks that they want, to get
right. That's what I mean by fast. Like, where they need to, there's not a lot of wasted motion.
Right. They know what their defense is built around. They run the break as well as anybody at this point. They move to find those open shooters. They're just doing everything the right way. They're clicking, and they are a team loaded with smart players, really smart players. And there too, like, you already had a bunch of guys who had some chips on their shoulders. They were smart. They were doing what they do. And then you add Jay Crowder and Joe Ingles to that mix. On top of that, like, to be able to bring those guys in the second unit where those are just winners, They just make the right play and do what they do without getting outside of themselves. I love the roster that they have around them. I can't say enough about the Bucks. And we're going to be, I think, very surprised if somebody else can pull this off, but you're going to have to give major hats off to whoever is able to pull that off.
And they're so fun to watch. Like, Bobby Portis is a joy to watch on the floor, right? It's just so much fun to watch them play. And it will be disappointing when the Knicks beat them in 7 for people in Milwaukee. But I do think they can make it to Game 7. And I do give Milwaukee a lot of credit for making it to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals against the Knicks. If it's the Knicks, I'll be rooting for clearly the entire time. But if the Knicks go out, the team I'm most interested in watching, besides hating Boston, is clearly, I think, Milwaukee, just because I think the best team. And the NBA needs to give us another one of these series where the best team is out there healthy and wins it because they're the best team. And if you get a fully healthy Denver and a fully healthy Milwaukee together, I think it's going to be a good, fun series. And I think the best team, Milwaukee, is going to win. So I think you two get the two best representatives. And I don't think we get that every year, the NBA. Most of the time we do, but the last few years I feel like we've been a little, as far as I would think, the best team because of so many injuries, So
what's crazy, just looking at some efficiency numbers, and I know we got to go here, but offensively, Milwaukee is ranked 17th in offensive rating, but second in defensive rating.
But that's counterintuitive to my point, so you should take it back.
Not
are they really that far down? Who's most efficient? Sacramento's up there.
Offensive rating is Sacramento, number 1. Denver 2, Philly 3, which is surprising. Boston 4, then the Knicks in 5th, then the Jazz in 6th. Dallas, Portland, Cleveland, Atlanta, Golden State, Toronto, Memphis, Brooklyn, OKC, Phoenix, then Milwaukee. So there is some noise in there. There's some teams that might be good offensively, but not good on the defensive end. But then the Bucks sitting second in defensive rating, and that second is a literal tie with the Cavaliers. So
when you get into some of these more specialty stats,
defense wins championships, right?
Just take someone with a grain of salt, pay attention to the whole picture, not just the fact that Milwaukee is middle of the pack, or below middle of the pack, actually, because that'd be around 14 or 15.
Right.
All right, Joel C. Cortez, I think the Keegan Murray episode has met its match.
It has. And if you want to check out the video version of this, find us on YouTube, like, share, subscribe, ring the bell over there. If you want the audio only version, Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast, check us out. This has been Basketball by Association, and we got to go.